I started this ministry over at Hillsdale Care, and then I got to know Pastor Randy, and then it got a little bit thinner and thinner and thinner, and then so some of you guys watch out because Pastor Randy causes baldness.
Contagious.
It's contagious. As you said, my name is Chris Baker. I'm very excited to be with you here today at Camp Chetek. Camp Chetek is a very close partner of our church. We've supported the ministry of Camp Chetek for a very, very, very long time. Many of our own young people have been through team. They've also come on as counselors. Two of our members are board members here at Camp Chetek. So our church is very involved with this ministry. We've been praying for you all for weeks. As you get adjusted to your duties, your schedule, the short amount of time that you have to prepare for ministry here. How many of you would you say this is your first real dive into ministry? Real dive. And I maybe you've done some work at your local church, but outside of your local church, first real dive into ministry. Okay, a few people. You are already way farther ahead than I was at your age, okay? Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I have a wife and 5 kids. So when I've been a behavioral consultant, I've been a special ed teacher, I've been a supervisor at an alternative school. I learned everything that I know through dealing with my own children, okay? These are little monsters. I know they look adorable, but they're actually, my kids are pretty great, but at the same time, they're sinners in need of Jesus, okay? And so, this is my family. Julie's my wife, Evelyn's my eldest, and then it goes Will, Hudson, Samantha, and then Elliot. But they all have code names. I can't share those with you. That's a family thing. So, something I like to do, pastors need to have hobbies. We need to have friends outside of just the Christian bubble. And so I like to lift weights. I also do jiu-jitsu. I started that about 2 years ago. I really enjoyed it. Right now I'm a powerlifting coach, and I am starting a Special Olympics program for kids with disabilities on how to lift properly as part of Special Olympics. So get involved in your community, okay? Ministry doesn't just happen inside the church walls. I know you guys agree with that because you're here at camp. But also find ways to plug into your community once you're done here, where you can be a light where light's not shining, okay? And that's the mentality I go to in these different environments. I am I forgot that one. I don't know if you like Strange Planet, but that's one I like. So this is my church, First Baptist Church of Hillsdale. It's probably about a 15-minute drive. You drive as fast as Pastor Randy, it's about 12 minutes. I know. Don't get in the Kubota with that guy. But I've been there a pastor for about a year and a half. Before that, I was a rural pastor in central Illinois for about 5 years. Part of that, I was pastoring 2 sick, dying churches in Illinois. I had very ornery congregations. It was very difficult ministry. Up here is a dream. I love it. Being close to Camp Chetek and the resources here, and Pastor Randy. Also having good Bible preaching, solid churches in my area, and lots of opportunities for ministry, even though we're rural. Jail ministry is something that we've gotten involved in. Recovery ministry is something that we do. And so, if you're looking for a place to come while you're here at camp, I would plug our church. Okay, it's very hospitable, very warm, small, but mighty. Okay, so I'll leave it there with the personal plug for the church. But I was saved as an adult. If you were anyone the first saved out of their family, anyone have that experience? First born again person out of your family? Amen. Same situation for my wife. She was the first born again person in her family. She had a very difficult upbringing. My family was very moral. Her family has a lot of substance abuse type issues. And so we were both unsaved, college aged people in the world. And then I get saved, and a year later she gets saved, and then we get married. And so it's a great story. I'll tell you guys sometime, hopefully someday in the future if you're interested. But I was a special ed teacher. So when I say I was saved as an adult, I was already in my career. I was already done with college. And so I was saved as an adult, as a special ed teacher. And you might go, oh, he was a special ed teacher. Oh, you must have had a good heart. No, I had a satanic heart. I had a heart that was wicked and deceitfully wicked. But I worked with young people with disabilities, with mental illness, with behavioral disorders, with substance abuse issues. I started in grade school. So if you can imagine, mental illness in grade school. Kids that were very violent, very self-abusive, a lot of sin issues in their life. I started at the grade school level, then I went out to Oregon, the state of Oregon, and I taught at a middle school there, and then back to the Chicagoland area where I was a teacher in a drug rehab program for, if you ever been around Chicago, the Audi Home. Has anyone ever heard of the Audi Home? It's the Juvenile Detention Center of Chicago. They have juveniles that have committed murder there. I mean, it's serious, difficult clients. If they were court-mandated drug treatment, they would come to us from Cook County, from the Audi Home. They would come in shackles in the orange jumper as juveniles. Most were gang affiliated. We had about 8 different gangs in that center, which was explosive. They would come and then they would let them out of their shackles, and then they were ours. We had no security. Okay, we had no locked doors. So that was a huge adjustment. And then I went and worked at Victory Academy for Boys. Have you ever heard of Victory Academy, Mark Massey's program? If you've ever heard of that, we were residential parents there. Then I was a high school alternative program director, or rather a supervisor. I was a behavioral consultant for a school district. I was a crisis intervention trainer, which means whenever a kid was in crisis and violent, self-abusive, or abusive to other people, I would respond, and I was on a team that would have to do physical management, restraint, so 15 years of that is why this happened, okay? Very difficult adult decisions that you make as a young man, and then you don't realize where it's going to take you in your career, but I loved it. It was great. There's a lot of benefit to it. Any teacher majors here? Okay. If you guys have any questions, please. I can give you my email. I was a special ed teacher for 15 years. I've seen it all. I've been everywhere. So if you have any questions about special ed or behavior, things like that, I can get you resources, anything like that. So what I want to unpack today is, in those 15 years, I said I was a agency trainer, and then I was a school district trainer. So all of the teachers that were mandated to have certain trainings, a 4-day training called crisis intervention or therapeutic crisis intervention. It's 4 days of training. I'm putting it in an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, so it's a great training. If you're ever in schools, you'll probably be CPI or TCI trained if you're going to be working in special ed. So, some of the ideas, though, things that I want to unpack for you, are going to have to do with de-escalation, how to de-escalate situations, and then also how to manage crisis, behavioral management, crisis management. This training, this time, it's 4 days. I've got an hour. So what we're going to do is just look at, if anything, help you think about de-escalating problems. Do not become part of the problem. Remove yourself in a sense, detach in a sense, and think biblically. Think like Christ would in this situation. And after crisis, not only grow through it, but then start to repair relationships when they are hurt, when trouble comes. Let me start with a question for you today. What gives you the greatest amount of apprehension this summer? Regarding your work with young people, what is your greatest apprehension? Who's got one? You're lying if you say you don't have any. Yep.
My kids are going to run wild.
My kids are going to run wild. Yeah. Others? Randy?
Working with Brent today.
Noted. Others? Yeah.
Being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable. Okay, so opening up and then having that used and weaponized against you, maybe? Yeah.
That I'll react incorrectly to.
What do you mean react?
Oh, jeez.
Thinking anybody? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. You might react in the wrong way. Okay. For sure. What are you apprehensive about? Yeah.
Not understanding or not having the answers for a situation.
Oh man, that's a big one. I'm supposed to be the Christian here. I'm supposed to be the counselor. I don't know the answer. Sure. I'm sure many of you are apprehensive about these. Yeah.
But they won't listen to anything you say.
Yeah. They won't listen. I'm the adult here. They're supposed to listen to me. They won't. Because they're kids. Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah.
That they're going to be like watching everything I do so that I don't want to like accidentally.
Oh, I'm just gonna kind of sit back and look for a chink in the armor, and then maybe, like, yeah. Vulnerability again, right? Fear of vulnerability. I'm too close in age. Anybody have that one? How can I minister to people being that close in age? I'm inexperienced. What if they have a Bible question I don't know the answer to? What if they say something and I don't know how to react, so I just freeze, but I should say something? All of these are reasonable apprehensions, okay? Cut yourself some slack. These apprehensions are real, okay? And that's okay. If I were your shoes, and I have been in your shoes because I was a secular camp counselor, apprehensions are part of growth, okay? Because you're going to find working through these apprehensions to grow you as an adult and in your spiritual maturity. But the biggest question that a lot of you will probably have, and what those questions are focused on, is what behavioral issues am I going to face? Am I going to handle the behavioral issues well? I don't want to be ill-equipped. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to look foolish. I want to deal with things the right way. Something out in the open that needs to be said. Settle this in your mind today. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be made to look foolish. You're going to question whether or not you have made the right decision about coming to camp this summer. You will question the way that you handle the behavior. You will react in anger and have your patience tested. That is okay, because that is part of the process of maturity, okay? You have to live through it, okay? There's no synthetic way to grow up in your adult life, but also spiritually. So, ministry is a minefield, okay? You're going to step on a mine. You know this. I know this. Pastor Randy, do you know this?
Yes.
Are you expecting perfection?
No.
Okay. Okay, deflate, everybody. Okay. Does he have expectations? Yes. Are you going to make mistakes, and is that okay? Yes. But ministry is a minefield. We're going to step on a mine. We can't help but step on mine sometimes. But what you can do is minimize the fallout, okay? You can make the crisis profitable. Crisis can be profitable. So the first beast that has to be slayed when you're going to work with behavior is the ego. First and foremost, you have to get over yourself. You have to acknowledge the flesh, our anger, our sarcasm, our fear, our desire to control. All of those nasty attributes are going to come out. Okay? Many of you have siblings. How many of you have siblings here? Okay. You're Baptist. All right. Amen. Subdue the earth. Any of you have conflict with your siblings? How many of you have had some level of conflict with some other human being in your life and you felt guilty about how you handled it? Don't lie, the Lord is watching you. So circle back to why you might feel guilt or shame or regret about how you handled it. It basically comes back to reacting outside of the Spirit. Okay? We know the scriptures say, thou shalt not murder. But we are told in the scriptures to war against ourselves. When I say we have to slay the ego, we're at war with ourselves. We have to fight against temptation to prove ourselves right. Because these kids are going to make you want to feel like you have to prove yourself right. You have to fight pridefulness. You have to fight the feeling that when you've been treated unjustly, that you have the right to demand justice. That there's not going to be justice in some of these situations, okay? You're just going to have to roll with it and suck it up. That's what it is. We're taught to fight against our own passions, our own sinful passions. The idea, what ego lies to us and tells us is that we are right and everybody else is wrong. Working with children teaches you many, many things, but principally, your ego is the enemy. Your ego is the enemy. You have to murder the ego. You say, but I can't. Not until we're in glory. We're not going to fully get rid of the old man. You're not going to have the internal peace until we are received by Christ. But our time here is going to be about warfare. And so you're fighting against your ego and putting on Jesus Christ. And so sometimes you have to compartmentalize yourself, and this is what I mean. For the good of another person, you have to make that person more important than yourself. That's why you're camp counselor. That's why you're here. You're making somebody else the priority over your own self. Your own self wants to be validated. Your own self wants to be regarded as the authority. You have to make other people more of the priority. You have to give up and own to the simple fact that unless you're going to put hands on a person, unless you're physically going to manage them, you cannot actually control them. I can bark at you all day long. My first year of teaching, that's all I did. Just barked at people all day long. You know what I found? Their parents might bark a whole lot worse than I do. Right? Or if they get satiated on my bark, guess what? I've got no other tool in the toolbox. If I only use a hammer, man, if they get used to the hammer, then it doesn't elicit any kind of behavioral response. What we have to do is we have to recruit them to wisdom. We have to, in Christ's likeness, show them the wisdom that Christ offers. I want you to look at Psalm chapter 1. I'm not going to uncover anything that you haven't already probably figured out about Psalm chapter 1, but I want to look at some verses. Psalm chapter 1 talks about wisdom. We need to recruit these young people to wisdom that we have, wisdom that we know about Jesus Christ, wisdom that they don't have. So it begins, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by rivers of water that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he do will prosper. That's talking about you. A person who has wisdom. A blessed person. If you're a blessed person, you are not walking in the counsel of the ungodly. You're not standing in the way of sinners. You're not sitting with the scornful. But then look at who you're working with this summer. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Who or what way does the ungodly walk? They walk in the counsel of who? Ungodly people walk in the counsel of ungodly people. They stand in the exact same pattern as the life of other sinners. They relish in the seat of God's scorners. That's who you're working with. They don't have Christ. And so they don't know better. They have pain. They have trauma. Satan has manipulated the heart into believing that not just that Jesus isn't real, but that Jesus is actually the enemy. That's what they're convinced of. And just like dried leaves off of a branch, the wind blows and they follow. And what Scripture says is that these will stand in the judgment. These will experience the second death. But you have the ability to recruit them to wisdom. Do you understand? That's your responsibility. Well, how do you recruit them to wisdom? Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy, or Holy One, is understanding. You have a unique opportunity to recruit these children to wisdom. You get to introduce them to the knowledge of the Holy One. You get to show young people who your God is, why He's good, why He's worthy to be worshipped. You get to introduce them to the awe of God, the fear of the Lord, the wonder of His story. We have to stop here and think. We can't talk about behavioral intervention or those topics until you see what you have in your hands. What is in your hands this summer? The behavior is not the issue. What you have in your hands is an unregenerate, dead spirit. What you have is a sinner on his way to a second death in the lake of fire. That is in your hands. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to let some little tit-for-tat tantrum or some little incident interrupt God's work in that person's life? That's when we talk about behavior. But essentially what's more important, it's the spirit that's in your hands. It's the life that's in your hands. Your ego can get in the way of that. Your ego and my ego, I preach to myself, our ego gets in the way of the gospel. It taints the gospel. We taint the gospel. Your ego and my ego can snare us into a trap of power struggling. How many of you have ever been caught in a power struggle with maybe a sibling? Maybe it's another college student. You're power struggling. How many times after the power struggle are you like, I cannot believe I just walked into that? You're smarter than that. Your ego can darken what God has to be illuminated through you. So you have to slay your ego. Ego is the enemy. So what I want to do, thinking about the gravity of what you're going to be doing this summer, now I want to talk about some behavior interventions, okay? Some practical ways that you can work with kids, interventions. These are designed to help you recognize your ego and how it's impacting another young person's behavior. Let me give you an example. I used to tell students, I can't force you to do anything, but I can tell you what I'm going to do. Do you understand the difference? I can't tell you what to do. Hey, go out and do the dishes. What's the kid going to say? No. Unless I'm going to put hands on that person, I can't force them unless I'm going to go hand over hand and make them watch this. I can't truly make anybody do. And so what I have to do is I have to recruit them. Okay? So making a statement like, go do the dishes, and then they don't, and suddenly you're in a power struggle, you've just set yourself up for failure. You've set yourself up to lose. And so what we have to do is we have to detach for a moment. We have to detach, think objectively, and then make a decision that's going to honor Christ. How does Jesus want me to act and speak in this situation? But sometimes before we get there, we have to get our mind set. Ego is the enemy. I need to detach because I'm getting emotionally involved. how would Christ speak life into this situation? Okay? Give yourself those 10 seconds, and you can hopefully keep a kid in camp that's about to get kicked out. Okay? So let's begin. Setting conditions. Setting conditions. Give me a setting condition that you are going to experience in your course of a camp day. What is a setting condition that you're going to experience? What do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
A really noisy dining hall.
A noisy dining hall. Is that a setting condition? Can that set a kid off? Yeah. Does it create kind of an energy that can then go out of the cafeteria into the next? So sometimes we're reactive to the thing that happens after cafeteria, right? But truly, where did it really start? Right? What's another setting condition that you're going to see at camp? Yeah.
Competitions between teams.
Competitions between teams that get personal, get violent, right? I'm all about competition, but yeah, sometimes it takes a bad lead. Okay? Others? Yeah, go ahead.
The heat.
Is the heat going to impact the attitude and the energy and the irritability of these kids?
Yes.
Is it going to impact you?
Yes.
Yes. Prepare for it. Get your mindset. Why am I feeling this way? That kid's always in. Have you drank enough water? Do you need to go take a time out and go get some air? Hey, that's okay. That's okay. There's going to be setting conditions, a scuffle, a physical bother, a word that was rude said to somebody, a lack of respect to authority. That's going to set you up for a power struggle. Our value system, how many of you were raised in Christian homes? Raise your hand. There you go. Your value system is radically different than those in the world. Radically different. I came from a non-Christian home, I can tell you. What makes you think that authority that you expect to be honored is going to be honored in another family, in another person's life who was raised with no value that you honor? You understand what I mean? In their eyes, you've done nothing to deserve honor. In their eyes, authority does not equate to honor. How many of you don't have an issue honoring authorities in your life? Yeah, probably a lot of you. You were raised in that value system. These kids, maybe they've been raised to be suspicious of authorities because authorities have been corrupted and authorities have abused their power in their families. Okay? Age and title means very, very little to those that have had inconsistent authorities. And so think about your setting condition. Now I want to talk about trauma for a minute. Look at that last one, being trauma informed. That's kind of the new buzzword in public schools and training, being trauma informed. Let me explain that to you. If something was said, even in passing, and it wasn't meant to be taken personally, but somebody said something about, maybe made a joke about, I don't know, something racial. But in your history, there's been a family experience of racism. That former trauma is going to impact what's happening there today. Okay? And here's what I mean. Think about somebody who grew up neglected, maybe poor. They come to camp and somebody makes fun of their shoes. Hey, guys, knock it off. Stop teasing each other. You have no idea what that statement just did to that kid who grew up in neglect. You understand what I mean? We have to be trauma informed. We don't understand exactly what's happened. Let me ask you a couple questions. Divorce, death of an immediate family member, drug abuse in the home, neglect, homelessness, family member incarcerated, promiscuous behavior experienced at a young age. Any of you, don't answer, any of you experienced those things? Let me go through them again. Divorce, death of an immediate family member, drug abuse in the home, neglect, homelessness, family member incarcerated, promiscuous behavior experienced at a young age. Those are your trauma indicators. You might say, I don't have any of those experiences. How many of those experiences do you believe some of the kids that you're going to be working with might have had? Let me read through them again. Divorce, death of an immediate family member, incarcerated, promiscuous behavior experienced before at a young age, homelessness, neglect, drug abuse in the home. All of those things, people who have that in their young life are astronomically higher risk for incarceration as adults. Okay? How many of you have had hunger or food insecurity issues? How many of the kids that you're working with have? That's what it means to be trauma informed. There might be things that you don't even recognize because of your value system, how you were raised. You don't even recognize what's going on in the life of these young people because it happened maybe years ago. But guess what? It's bubbling to the surface today. And so the next question is, well, how are you going to be competent in this? Well, what are your goals? What are your values? What are your beliefs? But then understanding other people are going to have different beliefs than you. People are going to have different worldviews than you. There's going to be cultural and ethnic differences in how we view the world. But your competence as a counselor, like what we said, you're not going to be perfect, but here's what your competence should look like. Do you self-regulate yourself? Do you know what I mean when I say self-regulate? How is a car regulated when I'm talking about temperature? What's in a car that regulates temperature? Yeah, right? You got some water, you got some coolant, right? You have to regulate yourself in order to help somebody else. So do you understand what I mean when I say self-regulate? I don't know if Pastor Randy is necessarily looking for perfection, but he's expecting self-regulation. Will you regulate yourself? Behaviorally, when you're dealing with a kid, will you regulate yourself to honor Christ? How many of you know your triggers? You're about to find out. What are some of your triggers? You know what mine is? I got 5 kids at the house. It drives me nuts. It's under my skin. Gonna explode. What's your triggers? You better figure it out. What are your triggers? Arrogance? Oh, don't be arrogant to me. Yep. Whining? Oh man. Good luck. Others. Yeah.
People talking during church.
People talking during church just gets under my skin. What is that? There's no respect. Me too. Amen.
People are louder than me.
What do you mean loud? Okay. Just make sure everyone's awake. Okay. Yeah, loud. I'm sorry, that was kind of loud. Sorry, yeah, pardon me. I shouldn't have done that. But loud, sure. Louder. Loud noises. Yeah.
People being lazy, just not wanting to do what you tell them.
Lazy. Absolutely. Is that frustrating? Yeah.
People disrespecting my friends.
Yeah. Mama bear? Yeah.
People interrupting someone else's story when they're not finished speaking.
Yeah. It's just disrespect. I'm being clear, why don't you understand? So everyone has triggers. Know what your triggers are, so when a kid triggers it, you don't react, okay? Think through, what are your triggers? What are the things that the kids are gonna do? Do you think kids are gonna intentionally bother you next week?
Yes.
I hope you do. Okay? Because it's gonna happen, okay? You are going to be intimately bothered, okay, by these kids. They're going to purposefully bother you. Are you going to let them, in a sense, are you going to handle it in a way that's going to help the relationship? What are some ways that you can handle those things? So knowing your personal triggers is important. Something that we can do though, teaching or treating each kid as an individual, looking at their strengths, looking at their abilities, thinking about their trauma. Maybe there is trauma, you don't know what it is, but you're being careful about things that you joke about. Co-regulation, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Self-regulation. Is there something physiologically going on, or they may be a kid on meds and they're off their meds? You know, there's a lot of different things, but thinking about different individuals is important. Don't just clump, oh, all kids are the same, because each individual kid's unique and they're going to have unique needs. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have a sibling under 8 years old? Okay. Why do they tantrum? Why do they tantrum? Yeah.
Attention.
Attention. Yeah.
To get their way.
To get their way. Attention. To get their way. What if I flipped it a little bit? They're tantruming because they don't have coping skills. If they had coping skills, they wouldn't be tantruming. Are they just degenerate little sinners? Or are they people without skills? Maturity gives them skills, right? So there's a lack of maturity, but there's also a lack of coping skills. So I would say you're right, but there's also something else going on. Why does an 11-year-old sometimes throw a tantrum? Are you going to see tantrums next week? Yeah, probably. Why are they tantruming? They're 11 years old. Don't they know better? Why are they tantruming? Because they've never been shown coping mechanisms. Tantruming has gotten them what they wanted. They've learned, my tantrum gets me what I want. So when I want something, I will tantrum. Does that sound like the 3 or 4-year-old? Put that 3 or 4-year-old in an 11-year-old body now, okay? Have you ever known a person much, much older, maybe 10, 11, 12 years old that still sucks their thumb? Have you ever seen it? You'll probably see it next week. Might. You know why some kids, why they suck their thumb? What is that about? You're way too old to be doing that. Why are they doing it? Coping mechanism. That's how they've learned to cope, okay? What are your coping mechanisms? How do you de-stress after you've been stressed out? What do you do? Do you have coping mechanisms? Yeah.
I learned to journal.
Some people journal, yeah.
Go for a drive.
Go for a drive, for sure, yeah. Go for a run.
Go to bed.
Go to bed. Good one, me too. Yeah.
Coffee.
Coffee, yep.
Get alone.
Say it again.
Get alone. Listen to music.
Yeah. So you have coping mechanisms. The kids might not have coping mechanisms, so you have to help them. You have to co-regulate with them. You have to use your coping mechanisms to kids that don't have any, or maybe are very immature in their coping mechanisms. What if a person said, you said running? What if a person said, you're going to have to deal with the stress that you have, but you can't run? How would you feel about that? Well, that's my coping mechanism. That's how I de-stress, right? Well, sometimes a kid's coping mechanism is to run away, right? Or sometimes their coping mechanism, oh, I'm getting barked down, I'm going to bark back. That's how they've learned to live, okay? So what I'm saying is, think about coping mechanisms, each individual child. Let's say things get hot, things get rude, things get maybe physical, crisis comes, a fight, a scuffle, bad words. What's happened is the young person's ability to cope, their regular coping mechanisms, have been exhausted. How many times have you seen a kid doing this? Have you seen that?
Yes.
You're gonna see it next week. 100%. 100%. You're going to see angry kids. That young person's coping mechanisms have been exhausted. And it's going to result in a behavior change. You're not going to like the behavior change. It looks something like this. When there's crisis, our job as counselors, staff, teachers, you support, you emotionally support, you environmentally support, so maybe you get the antagonist out, or maybe you draw the kid that's having crisis away from the antagonist. And then you try to reduce stress and you try to reduce the risk. When I say risk, I'm talking about a kid popping another kid in the face. And then you're trying to teach them that there's a better way. This is what conflict looks like. I know it's a bit small, let me explain it to you. You start with baseline. Then there's a triggering event. What's going to be a triggering event? Well, what were the setting conditions? What's going to trigger a kid next week? Huh? The heat? Yeah. What else? Another kid? That's going to happen a lot. Yeah. Tiredness, just crabbiness. Being away from home. What do you think? Maybe. There's going to be some triggering event. Then it's going to escalate. And then it becomes an outburst. After the outburst, energy is depleted. You start to move into recovery and you go back to baseline. Okay? Here's the point. If you can work through your issues in your schedule, your environment, you might not have the triggering event. If you have good staff supervision, you might not have the triggering event. If you intervene early, you might not have the triggering event. But then, if you can catch them in the escalation phase, it won't go to the outburst. So you understand what I mean? You see some kids starting to have a dust up. You go over and you begin to intervene. One's hotter than the other. You have a relationship with the one. You say, hey, let's go talk for a minute. And you take that student and you take him aside, away from the antagonist. You've just de-escalated what would have probably, without staff intervention, become an outburst. Okay? Why is that important? Why is it a good thing to keep kids from outbursts? It's going to keep kids in camp. Okay? It's going to keep them and their experience positive. It's going to keep them thinking about spiritual topics. If a kid has a dust up on Monday, and he's going to see that kid for the rest of the week, or on Wednesdays, and he's going to see the kid for the rest of his time here, how often is he going to be thinking about spiritual topics? So it's good to intervene, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep the door open relationally, because as an adult you're handling issues preemptively. The kid's going to learn to trust you. And so then you have an opportunity to recruit them to wisdom. Recruit them from ungodly, worldly wisdom to God's wisdom. 4 questions you can ask yourself. What am I feeling right now? So a kid, you see kids start to have a dust up. You see kids start to get antagonists. You start seeing posturing. You start seeing a crowd form. What am I feeling? What does this person need or want? What environmentally is affecting? If you guys will spend 30 seconds detached thinking, you can probably see environmentally something you can do to intervene. You don't even have to get between 2 kids. I'm talking about in the environment. Hey, you guys, let's switch seats. This isn't working out. What did you just do? You intervened in a way that's going to help de-escalate an issue. You're changing the environment. Always looking for opportunities to change things, to keep things more cohesive. Okay? And then how do I best respond? When we respond, we are trying to neutralize triggers. We're trying to eliminate triggers. If one kid is triggering the other one with all kinds of names and talking all kinds of nasty stuff, or whatever it is, you might not be able to say, hey, you need to get out of here. You might be able to take the crowd away. You might be able to take the one that's being the target away. Okay, if you have any relationship with the kid that's hot, maybe you need to step out and have that counselor who has that relationship then go to that kid and say, hey, this is what we're doing today. Let's go for a walk. That takes some thinking, right? That takes some humility to say, I might not be the best person for this job. I might need to recruit my coworker, my fellow counselor, because that person has a better relationship. I might need to step out because I'm the trigger. Now the kid's mad at me. If I stay in this, it's just going to escalate him. You have to have the humility to say, I need to step away. Okay? Not to leave them in an unsafe situation, of course, but you have to realize what are the triggers, and then you need to give that person emotional and spiritual support. You're trying to help them to gain self-control. They've lost self-control. In that moment, they're at their dumbest. Let me explain this to you. Who are my anger balls here? Who's an anger ball? Anger balls. Thank you. You. Thank you. Redhead. Anger ball. Shocker. Any others? Wave them proud, anger balls. Come on. Anger balls. Okay. Got some anger balls. Thank you. Okay. Let me tell you something about yourself, anger ball. From one anger ball to another anger ball. Oh, let me get this sheet. Paper. This might hurt your feelings. You're at your dumbest when you're at your most angry. Sorry. You might ask God to help shape your anger into something profitable for His kingdom, but anger is often the result of a lack of control. What makes you your most angry? What makes you your most angry? We already talked a little bit about this. Injustice? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There are no stupid questions. Yeah, you're right. Stupid questions. Others? What makes you angry? Yep. Disrespect. Yeah. I'm talking about my mom. Others? Yeah.
People talking bad about me behind my back.
Oh, yeah. Don't talk about me behind my back, right? Things are not going your way. A person not behaving the way you want them to. Something happened at work and it causes a delay. The video game is not working. Those things cause anger because you've lost control. Okay? But what happens when you're angry, your brain stops working quickly. So your anger issue and the anger issues that you're going to see are not necessarily anger issues, they're control issues. Is there something you can do about the environment that can give the kid back some control? If you can give them some control, will that help them feel like they are back into their baseline? Okay, things to think about. I want to show you a picture. Have you ever seen something like this? There's a lot of stuff below the surface. How many of you would say this is true about you? Feelings and needs. Man, I am an iceberg. There's so much more about me that you will never see unless I get to know you. Yeah. I let about that many people in. Okay? You know why? Because I worked with juvenile delinquents for too long. They made me jaded. No, like people will see the outside, but they don't really see what's going on underneath. Are kids the same way? Yeah. Do we give kids the same benefit of a doubt that we give ourselves or other adults? Do we appreciate kids and their feelings and their needs, or do we minimize their feelings and their needs because they're kids? But they have the same feelings and needs as you do, just with less maturity, and they're a lot shorter. So the idea here is that we need to extend the same grace that we extend to ourselves, the same grace that we extend to other adults about their feelings and their needs, and extend those to the kids. Something to think about. I want to move on into some communication issues for a minute. Now, most of us know non-verbal techniques. These are fairly obvious to us. Things that you need to be doing. Active listening is what it's called. Let's all practice, please. Sleepers, wake up. Yeah. Thank you. Facial expression. Smiling, yeah, I like you. Let them know that, because they know if you don't. Sometimes they wear that as a badge of courage. Silence, nods, let them speak. But something verbally, or not verbally rather, I want to show you. How much is actually being heard when a kid's in crisis? When a kid is elevated, when they're angry, when they're moving from triggering and now they're in the escalation phase, how much are they truly hearing? About 7%. So, what are they actually ingesting? They're ingesting your facial expressions. They're ingesting your tone of voice. That's a majority of it, 93%. 7% is your words. So you get a kid who's all amped up. And then what are we doing? Because they're amped up. Hey, you need to stop. Hey, you need to knock it off, right? We start barking. And we start correcting them, and we start telling them all the things that they're doing wrong, and we start to mount consequences on them when we invoke the name of Pastor Randy, and Pastor Randy's going to hear about this. And whatever we do there, what are they hearing? That's all they're seeing. That's all they're hearing. Okay? They're not listening to the words. What direction is their stress going to go? Straight up. Okay? Person's going to move up to outbursts. Let me ask you a question. Whose fault is that one? Who's to blame for that one? Staff. 100%. I'm sorry. Staff. You just made that a whole lot worse. Don't do that. Okay? Don't come barking at a kid that's already amped up. How many times does that work out in any facet of your life? Start barking at somebody when they're already mad. You know? And someone, do this. Okay? Do this when they're mad. Okay? That's the same thing. Okay? You're going to get the same response. And so we have to be thinking about our communication, to be clear, to be concise, to be compassionate to the situation. We're trying to resolve this peacefully so they can stay in camp. And so we have to think, why is this person upset? What do we say to this person when they're upset? I hear you. I'm listening. Tell me more. What happened? I want to know. I do care. I've been busy, but I do want to hear what's going on. Can you use statements like that? For sure. Can you use reflective responses? You tell the person you're the mirror and you're reflecting back to them what you see. You look upset. Yeah, I'm upset. Okay, tell me about it. I missed it. I just got here. I came into the bunk. You're mad. I missed what happened. What's going on? Can we go talk? Okay. Versus a counselor going in there and just guns blazing because they hear a ruckus. Okay. Here's what I hear that you're saying. And you know what? If you mistakenly summarize, they'll tell you, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, but what it does, it gives them opportunity to de-escalate. It gives them opportunity to breathe and to get some oxygen back into their brain so their cognitive functioning goes back up when their anger reduces. Sometimes you just need to give it a little bit more time. Okay? As adults, you're working on my timetable. I got to take this group of kids. It's 1 o'clock. We're going to be late. Pastor Randy, if somebody's a couple minutes late because they're dealing with a kid, you going to be having a problem with that? No. Okay? But here's what active listening does. It helps the person be less defensive. You're going to be working with kids that are going to have a lot of boundary issues. Sometimes they're over cuddly, and then sometimes they're very distant. You're going to have to work on their defensiveness. If you want them to be open to the Christ that you're trying to tell them about, you need to help them let down their guard. Okay? You do that through these active listening statements. Co-regulation, we already talked about for a little bit. Co-regulation, what you're trying to do is use your own self-control. You let them borrow your own self-control because they don't have any, or it's very immature. And so you can make some statements to help them gain some level of self-control. Your tone of voice. Sometimes they just want to drain off emotions. Here's what I learned about my wife as a young married man. When she was upset about something, she did not always want an answer to her issues. Did you guys know that? Is that when sometimes, ladies, guys, let me give you a clue. If she's venting, she's not looking for answers. She's just looking to vent. Okay? Let her bleed off emotions. Let her bleed off the pressure. Okay? And then when it's bled off, guess what? She course corrects herself. Okay? Women are pretty amazing. Drain off the emotion. Let them, if they have to get it out. Do you have any friends that just have to get it out? And once it's out, what do? They're kind of back to normal, right? Okay. So as a staff, what do you got to do? Hang back. Be watchful. Be prayerful. Quaily, please don't let this be. But then let them sometimes, and especially if you can get them isolated, isolate the conversation, man, that's the perfect opportunity. Let them bleed. Let them bleed out. 10 minutes sometimes. These kids, ooh. But once they get there, they're just going to deflate. That's the opportunity to breathe life into their situation. That's when you give them Christ. Okay? Those are teachable moments. And you don't have those teachable moments if you don't wait. Okay? If you're impatient. If you're not watching for these opportunities. Here's what we get stuck in. Conflict cycle. Something stressful happens. Young person's feelings are hurt. They react negatively with behavior. The adult, make it 10 times worse. Which creates what? New stimuli and stress, which then creates what? More feelings, which then does what? Gives you more behavior, which then, now we gotta be super tough. Which then, do you understand the insanity of this cycle? Have you ever been on it? Don't get on it with your kids, okay? Recognize the conflict cycle. There's some ways, these are techniques. There are some ways that you can work with young people to help get off the conflict cycle. Prompting. That's giving them direction, right? A caring gesture. Hurdle help means you get started and then I'll help you finish. Redirection or distraction. A kid's going off. You know what I like about you? Huh? You like something about me? What did you just do? You just distracted them. Yeah, you just moved their attention from one direction to another. Proximity. Closeness. If these two girls were talking, all I would have to do as a teacher, I could just start teaching from here. Guess what? You're going to be quiet. Okay? That's just going to happen. Okay? Directive statements, time away. So if you know two kids are getting at it and you have a good relationship with one and he's trustworthy, hey, why don't you go run this errand for me? Okay? Always have in the back of your mind something fake that the kids can do for you. Okay? Give yourself some ammo. Anticipating crisis. But these are just different things that you can do to help get off that cycle. Just for time's sake, because I'm not going to give it to your lunchtime. We can avoid conflict. Y'all looking at your watch now. Oh yeah, I am hungry. What's Mr. Pete making? You can avoid the conflict cycle, helping the kids make choices. Adults hate this one. Can you drop the expectation? You go, no. I said that you need to do this, and you're going to do it. What do we say about control? Are you going to force them? What if they call your bluff? How much do you really control? Kids can teach you that you have no control. Have you ever been with a 2-year-old toddler, trying to get them to sit well at a meal at a restaurant? How much control do you feel you have in that moment? 0. None. Welcome to next week. Sometimes you have to augment, and sometimes you'll say something in anger that really you're not going to be able to, like, if you don't shape up, Pastor Randy's going to send you home. You just dug your own grave, okay? Because what if he doesn't send him home? Then you're just the parent that always gives consequences. You get what I mean? Sometimes we have to drop or change the expectation for where the student is at that moment. It doesn't make us lose. We have to get out of the mentality that we have to win. What does that come down to is the power struggle, right? We want to win, but what are we winning? We're winning the power struggle. Are we winning their heart? Are we winning their relationship? No, we just burn it to toast, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes in wisdom, if we change, because what we're changing is the outcome of a power struggle, what we're changing though is the reception of wisdom. So we have to be smart about it. In LSI, this is something that we used to do. If you do have conflict, an LSI is a way to resolve conflict, the way to have a conversation after conflict. You isolate the conversation. Don't try to resolve conflict with a kid when he's around his peers. How far is that going to get you? Nowhere. Like nowhere. You're just going to laugh. Isolate the conversation. Then what you can do is explore. Tell me what happened. Tell me what you were feeling. I saw this, but I didn't see the whole thing. Maybe you did see the whole thing. Say, I didn't see the whole thing because you didn't. You didn't see it from their perspective. And so, what was their point of view? Then you're going to summarize. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this person said this, and that made you think of this, and that made you upset. Yeah! See what's happening here? The conversation is being led by you, but you're recruiting them. Then you connect the feelings to behavior. So when you feel like this is what you sometimes do. Yeah. How's that working for you? It's not working for you, man. You got to live a different way. And then you give them Christ. And then you can talk about what that life in Christ looks like. You can talk about how Christ would do that situation differently. How Christ would respond. And then you enter them back when they're ready, back around their peers. Okay, so these are, as I said, this is like 4-day training, all down into an hour and 15 minutes. But the point being is, if you can gather anything, hopefully you can use some of these strategies. I've made a sheet, it's a double-sided sheet for you, of just some of these slides to help you remember these things. You can take it on the go. It's got some statements that I didn't cover. If you're in a power struggle, say this, okay? It's like a cheat sheet. Here's a great one. We're power struggling, okay? We're arguing, right? Here's what I'm going to say. You're trying to bait me and everything like that. I'm kind of a sucker for it. Here's what I say. I like you too much to argue. Right? I like you too much to argue. We're arguing. Nice try. Almost got me on that one. What did you just do? You just de-escalated, okay? So the sheet that I gave Pastor Randy, it's got about like 5 or 10 of those kind of, oh yeah, good. Just different ideas that you can do to stop conflict. Last note before lunch. The word crisis in the Chinese is two symbols put together, danger and opportunity. In the Chinese language, every crisis has potential for danger. But every crisis also has an opportunity for change. And so when you are, as a counselor, working with these young people, when there is crisis, there's also opportunity. There's opportunity for you to give wisdom. There's opportunity for you to breathe life into that situation. Okay? Look for vulnerable moments. After crisis, think about your own life. When you have crisis, are you more vulnerable afterwards? Anybody have a grandparent dying? Sorry to remind you of it. Are you more vulnerable after that? Are you more sensitive to people who are going through the same things? Yeah. The crisis created vulnerability. Every crisis that you're going to come into as a camp counselor is an opportunity to breathe Jesus into that person's situation. Okay? So, let's finish up. Any Q&A, any questions? I'm going to stay for lunch. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stay, visit with you. But any off the top of your head? Immediate thoughts or questions? I just crammed a whole bunch of information down your head, so I apologize for that. But hopefully it's profitable. Why don't we conclude in a word of prayer? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it again. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess going through this this morning, I honestly wish I would have known some of these things earlier from my own personal life. How to de-escalate the situation on a personal level. Growing up, I was a fairly violent, angry individual. There was a couple of times where situations, if they would have gotten there, they would have put me into a program like the ones that you were a part of. And I don't know, just going through this, it really pulled up some different old feelings. But I'm thankful that you've given us a window into some of these situations, because some people here never dealt with that. Some people like me have been on the other side of this, and we didn't have people who were willing to understand. It was just misbehavior. And well, yes, it was misbehavior. There's reasons behind that misbehavior sometimes.
Right. What's the function of the behavior? All behavior has a function. So you have to dig. The behavior is what we want to deal with, but the behavior is not the issue. If you deal with the function, what's truly behind the behavior will cease. That's how you extinguish bad behavior, is that you get to the root of the issue. Don't just topically deal with behavior, right? That takes a long time though. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, praises? Nothing. Oh, we're thankful that you're here, praying for a good camp summer. So let's conclude in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for these young people, and I pray, Lord, that you'll help them this summer to be your ambassador, to be your representative, to speak life into difficult situations, difficult home lives. Lord, that these young people might be the only true, thoughtful Christian that they've had much exposure to. Lord, help them to wear that well. Help them to be the embodiment of Christ to these individuals, the hands and feet of Christ. And Father, I do pray that you will give each opportunity to minister, to edify, to maybe even bring one to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. Lord, I pray that you will bless the rest of the training in the weeks to come. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. First Baptist Church of Hillsdale would love to have you if any of you are interested. If that was awful for you, you should probably try another church, because I'm kind of the guy there. So